the fourth volume of the textbook, and we'll be over in, let's see here. Basically, pages 45 and through 50 or 51 thereof. Yes, that's good. We are encouraged to study the scriptures, comparative religions, psychology, philosophy, modern, practical, and occult science. This little book, this publication called The Great Controversy, Past, Present, and Future, is a publication that's put out by the Seventh-day Adventist. Now, how many of us really know much about the Seventh-day Adventist? Not many, right? Now, this is not a lesson on the Seventh-day Adventists. However, they end up having some thoughts about the Advent. Please look up the word Advent in the dictionary. Look up also the word Epiphany in the dictionary. Also look up and see if you have the word P-A-R, and it could be A-O-U or O-U-S-I-A. P-A-R, S-A, or it could be just S-O-U. P-A-R-O-U-S-I-A. S-I-A, okay? So you have the word Epiphany, you have Pararosa, and you have the word Advent. You know, it's like the word apocalypse. Everybody hears the word apocalypse, it's like your brain gets scattered. I know mine does, even after all these years of hearing the word apocalypse. And that basically means what? A revelation, to reveal. All right? So what does Advent mean? Now, while they got the word, which one?
Advent.
Yes.
Advent. The coming or arrival, especially of something awaited or momentous.
Now, that's what this gentleman called William Miller in the mid-1800s, he in the early 1800s started looking at prophecy. And the basic thought about prophecy at the time was, it's just too hard to understand. You can't know anything about Daniel and what he saw. You can't understand what John the Revelator saw. It's just too much for our brain to understand. But William Miller started to go back into the scriptures, and everybody look on the chart here. The second coming. Now, would they call it Yahshua's second coming? They wouldn't have called it Yahshua's second coming. They would have called it Jesus' second coming, or Christ's second coming. All right? What word do you have there?
Advent.
Advent.
The coming or arrival, especially of something awaited or momentous.
Now, does it speak anything about the advent of this one called Jesus in the Bible?
The other one is the birth of Christ.
The birth of Christ. We do know that the scripture does talk about Yahshua's birth, right? It's told in scripture that there would be, if they understood it, they would have known that he was going to be born at some point in time. All right, look at Epiphany.
January 6th observed as a church festival in commemoration.
So, in other words, this 2014, there will be a period called Epiphany. But what does Epiphany mean?
An appearance or manifestation.
So, or an appearance. Now, Yahshua has made appearances, hasn't he? Did he appear back here with the children of Israel? Right? Didn't he appear here at this point in time? Don't we basically say that there's going to be a universal appearance of Yahshua the Messiah at the end of this present kingdom age? All right? So we have Advent, Epiphany, and the other word that starts with a P.
Parousia, P-A-R-O-U-S-I-A, the second coming.
The second coming. Now, how many of you believe that Yahshua is going to come?
He's already here.
That's the point. He's already here. As you had the Jews back during Yahshua's time frame, they missed their visitation.
Right.
And the Christians, you would say, or Protestants, Christians, that's including Roman Catholics, they're looking for him to come. All right? Now, if you have your eyesight on, there's the scripture. Please get Daniel 8:14.
Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days.
So 2,300 is the number that's being seen. But what's going to take place in these 2,300?
Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Now, one of the biggest problems with William Miller is, first of all, and again, this is one of those little things, he starts in the year 457. Do we happen to have that date on any of the charts here?
Absolutely not.
We have right here Artaxerxes' edict, Zerubbabel Temple, 457. What else does it say there? Anything else? And then we're going to need to get over into the, I think, the 9th chapter, is it? Of Daniel as well, because it's going to start talking about weeks of years. Now, this is only there's going to be plenty more that could be discussed. Anything else there with the 2,300 days?
No, that was the end of that one.
Read it again.
And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Now, Miller takes 2,300 days also in relationship for a day for a year or a year for a day in the calculation. Everybody is familiar with that term, a year for a day. In other words, the children of Israel were out here in the wilderness for 40 years. Why were they out here for 40 years? Because of the 40 days that the spies went over and spied out the land of Canaan, their inheritance. And since they didn't believe a day or year for the day they're going to spend in the wilderness. Okay, there could be others. So did you find where it talks about weeks of years? That's in the Holy Name Bible. In the Holy Name Bible, it talks about, I think, weeks of years, where in the King James Version, it just talks about weeks. Now, do you understand what I'm saying of weeks of years? How many days are in a week? So if you have a week of years, you would have what? 7 years. Continue. Did you find it there in the 9th chapter? It's talking about that, Susan.
27. 9 and 27.
9 and 27.
And, well, to start at 26. Start at 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. And
Now
upon-
remember, what you have to remember is Yahweh was not pleased with Israel. And he took those 10 tribes of Israel and sent them into bondage to a kingdom called Assyria. Everybody got that? Yep. Then he wasn't really all that pleased with Judah either. Because about 100 and some odd years later, Yahweh is telling, and we're reading about this in our Jeremiah. You heard of this king called Nebuchadnezzar? Mm-hmm. Well, that's who the Babylonian king is. Yahweh is telling the children of Israel through Jeremiah that, look, I'm going to send you into bondage to Babylon, and you're going to be there for 70 years. And there's a lot to get into in that as well. So now, what else does it say there, Susan?
70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem.
Now stop. We have also the decree of Cyrus. And what did Cyrus decree? Remember, Cyrus is a Persian who came and overthrew the Babylonian kingdom. And it was through Cyrus that the Israelites were allowed to go from their bondage back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Solomon's temple has already now been destroyed. They have no physical temple to go in to worship. But Cyrus is allowing them, Jews, to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. But now you have the edict of Artaxerxes that says, go back and to rebuild the walls and the streets of Jerusalem. Now that was Miller's question. Well, when does this period of time start? Well, he came up with that time frame of 457. How he got it and what study he had, I don't know. But I do know that we do have 457 as starting the time frame. Now, what you end up having is Leviticus about his punishing them 7 times and how he would do it, and he did do it, because you heard of the book called Judges. So one of the judgments would be the tribe of Dan didn't do what Yahweh wanted them to do, so Yahweh sent Dan into captivity to Moab. Or he took Issachar and sent him in bondage to the Ammonites. Does that make sense? So in other words, Yahweh is starting to count up the judgments against Israel. So what takes place is, and as Dr. Kinley says, most individuals do not consider the time of 604 to 603 as being the 7th servitude of the Israelites. I liken that 7th servitude as being basically under house arrest. In other words, yes, there was Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and who was the other? Azariah, who you know basically as Belteshazzar, right? And Abednego, Meshach, and Shadrach, all right? In other words, what took place is the Hebrews who were being taken bondage, they took the poorest of the poor and the dumbest of the dumb. They didn't take that type of individual. They took the smartest of the smartest who could learn the tongue of the Persians, and they took Daniel. Would anybody consider Daniel being dumb? No. Isn't there a wiser than Daniel or so, wiser than Saul? So anyway, the long and short of it is they go into bondage. But what took place is the kings we're reading about, they paid tribute. They ended up paying tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. And what took place is, and I can't remember which king specifically, he went and showed all the riches of the temple to the king of Babylon, or at least one of his lieutenants or whatever. Well, what do you think took place? We want that. And that's then when you get into the story about the writing on the wall. See, the offspring or the lineage of Nebuchadnezzar ends up partying in the temple with the golden vessels they took out of the temple. Okay? And that's when Yahweh says, look, you Babylon, you've been found in wanting, and he's getting ready to overturn from the Babylonians to the Medes and the Persians. Since you've been found in the wanting, you're going to now lose your kingdom. And that very night is when the Persians came in underneath the wall and overthrew Babylon. So this overturn and overturn and overturn. So now back to the 457. That's when the edict was given to go and rebuild the wall and the streets. So now, they have now a time frame to start. Continue reading there, Susan.
70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins.
Now hold it. What's going to put an end to sin, folks? See, that's Joshua. He's going to really put an end to sin. Can he do it after he's dead?
He's going to have to die.
It's by his death, burial, resurrection. He's not doing it after he's dead, but he is going to do it while he's alive. It's through the sacrifice of Joshua. All right? Continue on there.
And to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity.
See, listen, Yahweh's not reconciling. He's reconciling us who are what? Sinners. After we've been cleaned up, back to himself. Does that make sense? Because we're not going to go back a filthy W-H-O-R-E. Does that make sense? In other words, we need to be cleansed now, presently. Because we can't wait to after our death to have that happen. In other words, we're in what is called the judgment. So remember that term as well. Continue on there, Susan.
And to bring in everlasting righteousness.
Now, who's the everlasting one that is righteous? That's Joshua. See, this, reading this versus the truth. That's why we should say, you know what, thank you, Yahweh, for not allowing me to jump into this. But we're all caught out of something. Continue.
And to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy.
And we know that some of Daniel's visions, the angel caused him to keep it sealed. He didn't reveal everything. Dr. Kinley did not reveal everything. He gave us everything we needed, which is who? He gave us Joshua. But did he give us every minute detail? He didn't give us every minute detail, but he gave us sufficiently enough to have our soul saved. Continue, Susan.
Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem.
Now who's that? That's Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes is a Persian. Continue.
Unto the Messiah, the prince shall be 7 weeks.
Now, 7 weeks. Are you reading out a holy name?
No,
Continue.
I'll keep on.
Go ahead.
And 62 weeks, the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times.
So if you have, let's do this, 7, and you have 62, we have what now? 69. Plus, you're going to have the covenant that's is it confirmed? 70 weeks. Now, this is what, pardon?
Times up,
Or 7 years, and that equals what?
490.
Okay. Now, do we have anything that deals with 490-year cycles on what we call the ages and dispensations chart?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just very easy time marker. We have what date right here? We have 1490 BBY, before the birth of Yahshua the Messiah. Well, Law Tabernacle, 1490. Then, if you have a cycle of 490, subtract 490 from 1490, how many years do we have left? 1,000. So that now is what? Solomon's temple. And you can read there the dedication, etc., and the building of Solomon's temple. So now we have a tabernacle and a temple. Is the temple more glorious than the tabernacle? Yes. That which was golden was taken and put in to the temple. Correct? Okay. There may have been other stuff, but we're just doing. So now we're going to take 490 and subtract from 1,000.
Right.
What year do we have now?
510.
510. And that was the going forth to build the temple. Correct? Didn't they build?
Yeah.
Well, it was, in other words, it ends up with Zerubbabel's temple.
Right.
All right? Because basically, if the children of Israel, they were in bondage until basically 534. Then, shortly after that is when the edict is given that they can go back to Jerusalem and build the temple. Well, did they build the temple in one day, 1 year? Well, the dedication of Zerubbabel temple was then in 510.
Right.
Make sense? The 510 is the dedication.
That's when it was completed.
And that would be what, 24 years, I guess, if you did math. That, I'm not worried about that point. We're just looking for markers. Now, people are going to ask, well, what about that gap from 510 to 457? How many years is that?
53.
53. Well, just kind of tuck that away on the shelf. But basically, how many from leaving out of Egypt to the law be spoken down, how many days was that?
53.
53 days. This one Yahshua Messiah, from the time he was put onto the cross to the outpouring of the Holy Spirit of promise on the day of Pentecost was basically how many years? 53. So now, we start in 457. And what they do, and I haven't done this in my calculation, this is this is Miller. And they became known as Millerites. Okay? They became known as Millerites. And basically the situation is, Miller wasn't looking to start his own organization. He wasn't looking to start his own organization. Once he looked and confirmed his calculations, he went into the Baptist churches. He went into the Episcopalian churches. He went into the various different churches to say, look, the advent of Christ is near. Does that make sense? I mean, wouldn't that be something you would like to be sleeping on and not be aware of? Or would you like to know that you're not going to be caught as a thief in the night? Does that make sense? So he got out there and spread the word. So now, 457. So what he does, if I can get this thing right, because as I said, I haven't done it. So if you have 483 years, remember how we got the 483 years? Anybody? How we got the 483 years? All right, so now we got to go back and recover a little bit. So now that is basically 69 weeks. And this is year. Now, if you said that we're going to go, now this is a plus number, and we're going to take a negative number, and there's going to be a 26, 27 year . 1883 to March 21st, 1844. 1843 to 1844 was the advent of Christ. Does that make sense? So here it is. He starts preaching, Chris. Look, the advent of Christ is coming in 1883 to 1884, and if it's 1841, right? Then 1842, and there were hundreds of thousands of people that believed. Now, everybody was accepting in the churches, correct?
No.
They weren't accepting in the churches. Many people didn't really want to see the second coming of Christ. And you understand the issues that go along with that. But the thing is, 1844 came in the spring. That's when March 21st is. It didn't come. The prophecy did not work. What would be your heart and mind at that point in time? I don't believe it. I'm going to give up. Some people lost faith and hope in their Jesus Christ totally and period, right? Now, what takes place is there's always those that say, you know what? These calculations are correct. There must be something that we did not understand. Well, then they asked the mighty question. Go back to 8:14 in Daniel.
And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Now their brilliant idea is, well, what's the sanctuary? Now, when you go back and read in here, where did they have to go to find out anything about a sanctuary, folks? But to where? In Exodus, the 25th through the 40th chapter. Right? That's where they had to go, because this is the sanctuary. They called this little building right here the sanctuary. But this is what they had thought originally, that Jesus Christ was going to come back to earth and purify this earth with fire. They thought this was a sanctuary. But it wasn't scriptural, was it? So now they go back into, the sanctuary. Well, if there's a sanctuary in earth, there must be what? A sanctuary in heaven. So where do they have to go then but into Hebrews? Right? See, this is purified by blood of sacrifices, but the heavens are purified with the blood of who? Yahshua the Messiah. So in 1844, there was the great disappointment. Then they also understood, well, you know what? It really wasn't the springtime. It was really in August. Well, August of 1844 came, and guess what? It still wasn't the second advent. But the numbers that they calculated was correct. So then they started asking about, well, what's that sanctuary?
Yeah.
Well, now it's a sanctuary in heaven, so Jesus entered into the sanctuary of heaven, where he has what they call an investigative judgment. In other words, he's investigating all those who died before Yahshua, all those who died after Yahshua's death, burial, and resurrection. There's an investigative judgment. What do we say about the judgment? The judgment is now. I'm sitting in my seat and thinking and trying to visualize, trying to read this is like reading fiction.
Worse than that.
They make it so beautiful and happy sounding, and you just would gobble it up if you. But here it is. He's in heaven, having an investigative judgment since 1844. And also, not only is he having an investigative judgment, it's what is called a probationary period. Do we ever talk about a probationary period in here? Dr. Kinley said that the end was in 1960, and that we were now in the probationary period. I'm not going to go into and deal with the 1960, but 1960 is basically 490 times 4. In other words, there is not going to be another 490-year cycle that mankind will have to live through before the universal revelation, because they have Jesus who's really coming back to physical earth on a physical cloud to be seen by everybody in this earth plane. Everybody knows what a globe is, right? Can you see somebody down in Antarctica see what goes on in a cloud in Jerusalem? I mean, but this is what the Seventh-day Adventists would believe. They were called Millerites. Well, the great disappointment came. The Millerites basically dissolved. But you know what? Then there became what is called the Seventh-day Adventists. What's the seventh day, everybody? Sunday?
Saturday.
We would call it Saturday. Now you start getting into how the mystery of iniquity gets into changing times and seasons. Because the popes, or you end up having shortly after Constantine, set, I think 325, Sunday as being the worship of the Sunday. And tomorrow is the moon day. Then you get into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thor's Day, Fridge Day, back to Saturn Day, all named after what? Pagan gods.
Used to have a trouble so.
What took place is they said, look, what makes you a true believer is to follow the true Sabbath. That's how you would distinguish. So they became what? Seventh-day Adventists. And another group that came off was the Advent Christian Church. And what they believe, I don't know. But it has to be something similar. They're going to take the basic calculations of Miller to show that the Advent was in 1844 and that he went into the sanctuary in the heavens. Does that make sense? All right. Now, then there were other little splinter groups that came off from that. Makes sense? But now, into volume 4. Into volume 4, I need to have you go to page 48. Page 48. Now I want you to see if you can connect from what I've been saying to where we would be reading, readers, or those of you who are following along. I would say the above is considered what?
And held fact, as the above is considered and held as fact by some of Christendom.
Hold it. So who is that some of Christendom? Had you ever, when you read that, thought about who was that Christendom? Anybody? I know I hadn't really thought about that Christendom. But I just went into the Millerites, didn't I? That's that Christendom. That's the Seventh-day Adventist. That's the Advent church, Christian church. All right? And there's probably others that may be believing in the numbers that I showed. So now, what is that 2,300 days? Well, Dr. Kinley starts back about what page? 45. And if you would take the time to read that. How many of you can read what it says right here on the bottom of this chart? It says Friday 1,000. Here it says Saturday 2,000. Here it says Sunday 300. Right? Now, what Dr. Kinley does, he goes into the textbook and he writes how that the first, second, and third day show forth 2,300 days. Dr. Kinley does not show that the fourth, fifth, and sixth day in relationship to 2,300 days. But would the 2,300 days also apply to the fourth, fifth, and sixth day? Yes. Dr. Kinley also goes in and shows the relationship of 2,300 days back here with the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. Dr. Kinley also goes into Jonah. Now the people asked Joshua to show them a sign. And Joshua told them that the only sign that there would be is Jonah being 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Correct? So again, what are those stories of 1, 2, 3 with the first day? On the third day, there was a what? A resurrection of the vegetation. Well, if something has resurrected, there had to be what before that? A burial. And what had to be before a burial? A death. So what we're trying to show then is in the fourth, fifth, and sixth day, what took place on the sixth day? The resurrection of man. Well, there had to be a burial and a death before in the fourth and fifth day. Well, we always go and show the death, burial, resurrection of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, don't we? Did Jonah also have a death, burial, resurrection experience? Because this one, all those are types and shadows, allegories, not the reality. They were pointing up to Joshua's death. So on that Friday, 1,000, Saturday would be 2,000, or if you said 1,000, 1,000, and Sunday being the 300th part of a day, what did he do on that? It's called what? Resurrection. What's down here? But death, burial, resurrection. So the 2,300 days that are being dealt with is showing for Joshua's death, burial, resurrection. And that's what the witnesses were with the days of creation, here with the children of Israel in Egypt, Jonah, and of course Joshua himself. It's just showing forth his death, his burial. It is no more esoteric than that. And those 2,300 days as
The 490 cycle I was talking about. Remember, we started in 457 of going back into Jerusalem and to build the walls and the streets. And those 490, add somebody add 490 to 457, how much year do we get? 33. And who was that one that was put on the cross in AD 33? Yahshua was put on the cross in AD 33. And he rose as a physical body. Saying that's what people out there in Christendom have going is raising a physical body. They have him coming back on some physical ground in the body. And they write it up so good.
Like, wow. See, the tabernacle, this temple here, Solomon's temple, the Zerubbabel temple, then you had the Herodian temple. All of that is what? Types, shadows, and allegory of who? Yahshua the Messiah. And when you read in the textbook, Dr. Kinley points out the sanctuary that needs to be cleansed is who? Yahshua. It's Yahshua. It's Yahshua's that has to be cleansed. Is that true or false, Dr. Welch? The body of Yahshua. That's the true sanctuary. Because do we want to get into the sanctuary in the tabernacle?